Absolutely splendid to see you. I've got a really, really cool one here for you tonight. If you're interested in dealing with pain, grief, and suffering, if you're interested in stunt riding, hypnotism, and what they have in common, well, you've come to the right place and you're listening to the right interview. I'm going to speak to Chantelle Buggins. She's an amazing lady. She's overcome some very serious suffering in her life. She's the sister of Dale Buggins, who was the very famous stunt rider in the late 1970s and early 80s. I was a big fan. Chantelle took part in his stunt riding, despite, or perhaps partially because of his fame and overseas success. Dale took his own life just before he was due to appear at the Melbourne show to perform stunts. Now, he and Chantelle were brother and sister and very, very close. Now, to make it worse, Chantelle actually found him. After this, and she doesn't mind admitting it, she frankly spiraled downwards. However, she came to the realization that her self-destructive lifestyle was unsustainable. She overcame her addictions, and while the pain of Dale's absence is still very real and still very present, she's learned to deal with it. This is an amazing story. It's relatively short at under 13 minutes. Stick with it to the end. Please like, please subscribe, please comment. I really love reading your comments. I really love hearing about them, and I always pass them on to the interviewees. Because Dale is such an important part of Chantelle's story, I'm going to play a really short 2-minute take about him in the beginning. Now, that's just to put everything in context, and then I'll play the interview. I've called this Cunning Stunts for obvious reasons.
In the mid-1970s, a generation became enthralled with daredevils. Everyone was dreaming that they had what it took to be like evil. But it turned out there was just one boy who did.
What an amazing feat. Dale Buggins establishing a new world record, beat Evel Knievel's 19 cars.
You're at primary school and everyone was talking about him. Did you see Dale jump? Kid from Wyong, on a motorbike, taking on the world and out jumping the biggest guy in motorcycle jumping in the world, Evel Knievel. And he was 17.
I admire Dale dearly, not just working for him, but just for the person he was. Jumping over 15 buses or 30 cars, it's just like driving down the street to Dale.
Back then, it was a big deal. And I think for those young boys who are now obviously grown men, it was a memorable time in their lives, and they had Dale to look up to. It left a space in kids' hearts, you know.
I remember where I was when my mum called out from the kitchen, "Jared, Dale Buggins is dead." And I just remember freezing, thinking, what? Like, what do you mean he's dead? Racing in to watch the television at 6 o'clock that night to see a snippet, and that's it, and that's all we saw. In that era, when something like that did happen, you really didn't talk about it at all.
This morning, his career was tragically cut short.
The passing of Dale that day in a motel room, people say to me at times, you know, you must have known. You know, I was 16, I had no idea. I ran away from myself, I ran away from my family. The aftershocks have affected me nearly my whole life.
Unfortunately, the story's never really been told. Like, he did such incredible things. He had all the courage in the world to risk his life and jump over 25 cars and beat Evel Knievel, and he didn't have the courage to say, hey, I need help.
Yeah, I've come a long way since then. And it was, I think, because I'd finally acknowledged my pain, and it just, something just lifted from me. I'm sort of free now, I don't have to run from myself anymore.
Yeah, so just before I play the interview, I hope that gives some context for you. It's pretty amazing. Like I said, I remember Dale, and I also remember hearing about his tragic death, and I remember feeling the pain because I was a massive fanboy, and that wasn't me crashing my BMX at the beginning, but I was out doing stuff like that, trying to imitate Dale. Anyway, without further ado, he is this excellent interview. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for inviting me. It's pretty exciting.
Well, yes, it is. Someone who's done the things that you've done and, overcome the adversity that you have, and to be able to hear your story, I'm genuinely looking forward to it. But look, so you've got a well-being company that does hypnotism and, deals with anxiety and all that kind of stuff. Why did you start this up, and how did you get into it?
I think our life gives us guidance into which direction we're going to head. And sometimes that can take us into a space
Why did you start this up?
hurt and pain and self-neglect, addiction. And I certainly found myself in that space. Many years ago, I started drinking wine quite heavily. And, it got to a point where I was like, I'm better than this. I've got more to give than this. It does take such a long time to see through your pain from your childhood, from events that happen in life, give them this. From the fear. It does take such a long time to see through your pain from your. And I used to numb myself with the alcohol to try and numb the fear and self-loathing. But eventually, or at some point in my life, I must have had a light bulb moment where I was like, no, this is not good. And I chose to stop the drinking. And from that, the healing began. And then Zest for Life Solutions came into being because I wanted to give back. Mm-hmm. I wanted to give other people, I get all emotion. I wanted to give other people the opportunity to truly heal that pain, because that pain can really break us. And we see it every day out in the streets. We see it with our friends. We see it in the news. Mm. A lot of people's, and we often say, oh, look at that person as if it's, in a derogatory way. But that person has probably had a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, and they're dealing with it the only way they can. Our human instinct is to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
But when we find ourselves in that level of pain, it changes and we seek to destroy ourselves.
Some people like punishing themselves, like they've done something wrong, or they.
I don't know that they like it. I think it's the only way that they can find a way out of their mind. Their mind is punishing them, and the alcohol and the drugs is a way to numb that pain. And again, you did touch on it, the feeling that they're not good enough.
Yeah.
Whatever their, and I do believe that most of our pain comes from our childhood. We have good parents. My parents were great parents, but they had their own problems, and through, because they're human, and through their human interaction as little children, we saw that human interaction. It wasn't always good, so we saw things that traumatized us. So I'm not here to blame or banish anybody into the bad person. We all have stories to tell that brought us into places of pain or behavior that we probably wish we hadn't have done.
Yeah, I'm gonna come out and say something that kind of validates that, and it's just, I'd be interested in your comment on this, and I think it's going to be a little bit controversial, but I genuinely just want to know what you think. And incidentally, for any viewers, make sure you comment on this comment. Evil exists. It's a real thing. Without going into the deepness of my, the fullness of my thought, the easiest way of articulating is that I'm a Christian of the Catholic denomination, and so that at least gives me a framework that I can consider things inside and outside of. But what both that and my policing experience taught me is I'm reluctant to condemn anyone. Like, I have seen people commit seriously evil acts, and they've been motivated from the most basest of motivations, where something, seriously has almost taken possession of them and played out. But I still don't condemn people. Like, I know pedophiles, Chantelle, like lots of them. I know quite a few murderers. In fact, I've had murderers around my house and broken bread with them, and had dinner with them. I don't condemn. That doesn't mean that I don't judge the act as bad and I don't recognize the existence of evil. But this condemnation thing, that's just, we can't walk that path. It's just wrong. Like, when you condemn a human being,
I see where you're going with that thought process. And again, I'll come back to what does make a pedophile? Why are they that person? In your policing career, did you get their childhood stories?
Yes. So like I dealt with, for a little while I was in the Juvenile Aid Bureau, and so people would tell you, but also when you're an officer in charge of a station, so you've got people on the CPOR register, so the Child Protection Offenders Register, they've got to come in and register and tell you what they've been up to once a month, pretty much. Well, it depends on, for some it's once every couple of months. For some of the lower offending, it's even once a quarter. But so yeah, the answer to that would be yes. And there was an astounding correlation between people who've been victimized and people who went on to become perpetrators. But I've got to make this qualification, Chantelle, because we get comfortable explaining things that way, going, oh, well, this leads to this. It's like, yeah, of course. Well, to a certain extent, a human being is in an environment, and the environment that you're in and the things that you're subjected to are going to impact who you are. But I also know lots and lots. In fact, the vast majority of people who are offended against don't go on to become offenders.
Absolutely. It depends on what else was done, or what level of torture their mind went into after such atrocious events in their young lives.
Yeah.
Perhaps. We will never really know the answer.
No, you're right. And, yes, I would validate that. And it's yes and. It's not even a yes but. It's a yes and. But fundamentally, from what I saw, it depends how people framed it. So you can't help what happens to you, but you can help, to oversimplify. You can't help what happens to you, but you can help how you respond.
Our words are so powerful, Matthew, that we become what we say we are. Or we become what other people say we are, if we don't have the tools or the knowledge or the life experience to say, no, that's not who I'm becoming. Like the alcohol for me was like, how come when the realization came in that I'm an alcoholic, functioning though it may have been, it was just like, and then all those words and the way we speak about alcoholics, there's no room for any love or kindness. They're just an alcoholic. But through my journey of experiencing the childhood trauma, the trauma in my teens, and then drinking to numb it, alcohol is an addictive substance.
Yep.
Drugs are an addictive substance.
Exactly.
If you're in such pain that you need to numb yourself, then eventually, unfortunately, the addictive substance is going to take over.
Exactly.
Yet the person below is still that good person.
Oh, exactly. And because it's funny, we're really going to something that, I totally agree with everything you're saying. But when we talk about alcohol, we actually think of it as a substance. And that's true. It is a substance. It has a material nature. But alcohol is more of a pattern. It's a pattern of behavior. What it does is, you take this substance in, and the pattern is this. It lowers your social anxiety. It brings out some other things in you. So if we consider things as patterns as opposed to things, and this idea that this pattern is going to, and because it's dropping your social, the social anxiety and the things that you wouldn't normally do, it's dropping those things. It lets other patterns of behavior out as well that you normally wouldn't manifest in front of people.
100% agree. I did things when I was inebriated that sounded like great fun at the time, but looking back, I was like, some of those things were dangerous, they were irresponsible, that some of them were great fun until you wake up in the morning and your head's like throwing, and you open that one eye and go, what the heck did I do last night? Yeah. And then it starts to come back to you, and some of them are not pleasant memories.
Yeah. But see, the other thing is getting that self-knowledge, it's like, sometimes doing bad stuff is fun. You know what I mean? Especially
totally.
if it's
Drugs
a bit
and alcohol
dangerous.
is fun until they're not.
Yeah. It's great. And some things that we know are naughty, and not just naughty in the whole sense, but some things that are actively evil and bad. It's fun. It's fun to engage in some of that behavior. And
I want to be careful of the words we're using here, just for the audience's sake, because fun, it's attractive.
Yes.
Yeah, it's attractive
Yes.
because when we sell something as when we're saying something's evil yet fun, then I feel like we may be selling it almost.
Yeah.
So I just want to be a mindful of the words. Words are powerful, right? It's an attractive place to go because of the mind numbing that it gives you. So you can just be free to do the naughty things or the evil things we wouldn't have called them evil things, but sometimes the behaviors that come with mind numbing substances, are not so charitable.
No, precisely. And then, and when you wake up in the morning, like you said, or I mean, for me, like being in the police, so you kind of like, you have to do things that that most normal human beings don't have to do. Like, you
Yep.
have to.
And I stand by the police. You guys got a bad rap for a long time, but I've worked closely at your side with the Department of, well, I won't go there, but with some of the jobs I've held, I've worked closely at your side, and I've got nothing but, bravo. You guys do some pretty shitty stuff.
Thanks. Well, I'm out now, but I did 30 years. So that's life sentence in a bit. I did a life sentence. I'm on parole now, Chantelle. I'm out.
Oh, God. On the straight and narrow now.
Yeah. Well,
one of the greatest trainers that we have is the news, unfortunately, and some of the graphic information that they share on the news about how things were done and how that person did X, Y, Z in this way. I remember there was a newspaper in the past year that actually did a graphic description of how to break into a particular lock. And again, having worked in several roles, many houses have those locks on them. And the break-ins in the particular areas around where I live went through the roof because all of a sudden all these people know how to break an average front door lock.
Using that modus operandi.
The media has a lot to answer for in the terms of what they display, criminal acts, how they're done, who did it, when, the getaway plan, even like movies as well, obviously. They teach us or give us ideas that we may never have ever thought about. So it's all around us, unfortunately, or fortunately. You either realize, oh, that's a great idea, let's go and be naughty, or we can realize, I'd never do that. I'm so glad that that's not in my scope of things to live up to.
Yeah, exactly. That's not something I want to fulfill. But you've talked about how trauma goes into this, and you don't have to discuss anything that you're not comfortable with. But like, I know that one of the things that's led you into this, paying this back, is some of the trauma that you faced as a child. You're Dale Buggins' sister. So Dale was an amazing young man, and he was like one of the world's, potentially a world great stunt rider, right up there with Evel Knievel. Can you talk us through? And I know that you and your brother were very close.
That photo that you just showed was from the Australian Women's Weekly when we first started. That was when I first started to get involved with Dale's stunt riding. Dale initialized his career by jumping over Mum's car in the back, Tirana, I think it was, in the backyard. And then we had a property, 21-acre property. And then Dad's ute joined the jump, and then another car, a friend's car, and then eventually Dale was jumping 4 or 5 cars down in the back of our property. And then Dad had quite a scientific, clever, although finishing school at 14, had a very scientific mind, especially around aerodynamics. And so he designed a ramp that was aerodynamically sound, and then we got the high wire going, and it just kind of started in our backyard, really. But as young kids, we used to ride at a little place called Dude Ranch, and they had I had a little Pee-wee 75, and Dale had a Honda 75, and we used to race around this Dude Ranch. But we had all little jumps and things set up there, so it kind of started in our childhood. We were around motocross and motorbikes and riding in the forests and so on. But anyway, ended up building, and then when I joined Dale doing the stunt work, we went worldwide. Well, not completely worldwide. We did Americas, New Zealand, Australia, some of the other smaller places around the world, and we got quite famous. And I think Dale was a very humble chap. You know, me, I probably rose, I could have risen to that fame, you know, and shouted out and, yay, look at me. But Dale was the kind of guy that just put his head down and gave his little nod and thanked everybody. Very humble, very kind, very generous. And I think the world just got too big for him in that state of fame. I think he was such a homebody, such a kind-hearted, quiet chap. You know, I was the black sheep of the family and he was the quiet guy, always in the shed tinkering on the motorbikes. Not a big socializer. I'd like to have socialized with friends, but not big on going out. Whereas if I could have gone out the door at 12, I would have been, you know, out socializing, partying. So quite different character. And in that photo, you also see my baby sister, Emma, who's here with me in Australia at the moment, which was just an absolute pleasure to have her in my company. Being so many years apart, we did spend a lot of years apart because of the age gap. And Emma never really got, that was just a bit of a play around with Dad putting her on the high wire, which of course, hanging a baby upside down didn't get very good press, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But Dad's, you know, he was right there with her. It was moments, but it's still not a good idea. But just the same, we as a family moved around doing the stunt work, but eventually it just got too much for Dale. I think that industry is quite corrupt, I guess, in the sense that there was a lot of promises made to the Dale Buggins stunt show and very little payment coming through for it. My dad, again, like myself, trusts people, and handshake deals were made. Unfortunately, handshake deals do not bring in the money or the costs that was associated with our team of 6 people traveling around the United States. And I think it just was too much. Dale, I don't think he could handle that someone could be that evil, if you like. And his sense of well-being seemed to go down quite a bit on that tour, although I don't remember it being to the point of anyone else. We were tired, you know, we were all tired. We were on the road a lot, sometimes slept in the back of the truck just because we're in transit, crisscrossing the United States. And then when we flew back into Melbourne, without us knowing, Dale went and purchased a rifle, and 3 days later he took his life. So he'd been sitting on that idea for quite a long time, 3 days to sit on an idea of suicide, with the weapon at the back of the ute. Apparently there was signs, of police found signs that it was sitting in the back of the ute behind the seats. And yeah, then Dale took his life. The world was just too much for him. The evil of which we spoke about earlier in this chat was too much for Dale. I'm also quite an empath and a soft person, but you know, I'll also stand up or walk away. I'm probably more walk away from anyone trying to hurt me. But if it's around my family or somebody else, then watch out, you know, or my friends. But I think Dale was just too soft for this world and didn't like what was happening around him in terms of, well, being in the industry, the business of stunt work or the entertainment industry is quite harsh. And Dale's not a harsh character at all. So sadly, Dale took his life, and that left me in a state of disrepair, shall we call it, for quite some time. We had some trauma with parents, you know, who weren't aligned with each other when they were young. There was a lot of arguments between my parents, now commonly known as domestic violence. My parents were good people, but, you know, just the circumstances of when we were little kids, things got in the way of them being together in a good way. But they sorted out eventually and came back together. Good parents, as I say. And then that trauma of seeing your parents fight and have bust-ups and things being smashed around the house, and then and would have traumatized both Dale and I. And then on top of that, the trauma of Dale passing in such a tragic way and finding him deceased put my mind into such a spin for such a long time. And I think I just ran away. I traveled for years and years and years. I went to Europe and I worked in tourism resorts, probably about 7 years. And of course, working in a tourism resort, it's all about taking people out in the evening. So it was free-flowing alcohol. And it was the perfect environment, really, to create the storm of relying on alcohol to numb the senses in the name of good fun, which it was good fun at the time, as we mentioned earlier. But unfortunately, that came back to bite me when I realized that I had a drinking problem. And if I didn't make some changes, then I would certainly fall into the category of alcoholic full blown. And thankfully I did see the way and made my way through that. And that is when Zest for Life came into being. I used hypnosis to stop myself from smoking. I used hypnosis to cure and heal myself through the art of alcoholism and many other emotional dysregulation, I guess. Hypnosis, I turned to hypnosis. I've been to all kinds of psychology, psychiatrists, other kinds of healing modalities, and they just didn't sit well with me. I didn't, whilst psychiatrists and psychologists have absolutely that place, many people I know rely on them heavily for trauma in their lives, and that they get great satisfaction, great healing from that. It just didn't register with me that way. So I want to be careful about how I say these things so that it's not scaring people from going that way, because it is an excellent way of healing to talk it out with your psychiatrist or psychologist. But hypnotherapy just changed my level of, or my way of thinking, and certainly changed my addictions. So I then, some years later, studied NLP and a couple of other things around neuro-linguistic programming, became masters in those modalities, and there was a little bit of hypnosis in that. I thought, that's where I need to be. That's the very thing that healed my life was hypnosis, hypnotherapy. And so when I started studying and started, using it with clients, it was just like a mind explosion. It was just, I found my passion. I found where I was meant to be. I found what it is I'm supposed to be doing. And that is to help people to get out of that tough situation quite easily. Hypnosis is quite quick. I have to be, again, mindful here. If there's a deeper trauma that needs deeper healing, then certainly I refer them either to a doctor or to a psychologist.
Yep.
But in terms of, the addictions and some mindsets, hypnosis or hypnotherapy is a great modality, providing you've got someone that's passionate and done the training and the healing. I've done several different modalities of hypnosis, and I'm currently doing another clinical hypnotherapy studies because it's in more trauma-based clinical hypnotherapy. So that should be finalised by mid next year, I'm hoping.
Well, that really is paying it forward. And the other thing that I really like about that is, like, you've developed a skill. So out of this terrible suffering, let's call it for what it was, a good thing has come. Can I ask this question? How did what you go, because you said that you actually found Dale, and you and him were very close. That must have been, God, I just can't think of the adjective to and I don't want to dig into anything too deep that might upset you too much, but like knowing that
it was kind of numbing, to be honest. It was just numbing. And I remember Dad and George, Dad's best friend, talking in the hotel room, and I just turned around and said, look, he wanted to do that. That's what he wanted to do. Just let it be. Let it be now. Obviously traumatized, just literally shouted at my dad and his best friend. And I think I just went numb for years, to be honest.
Yeah. That's the dangerous thing about numbness. You think that you're on top of something, but you're not. It's kind of masking. Right. Yeah, it's like, I know so many coppers that, like, they got this, and I've talked to them, and they got this idea that's like, well, I'm numb. I don't feel that emotion. That means I'm on top of it. It's like, actually, you're in a really dangerous place.
It's true. Because I was so young. I was 17. I didn't know how to deal with it, and I actually did say to my dad, who was a very strong, tough man, I said, I think I need to speak to someone, Dad, at some point down the track. I don't remember how far after Dale's death that was. It's all very much a blur. That whole probably 10 years of my life was just a blur. And he said, don't be stupid, we're not crazy. Because that was his mentality of what a psychologist was, that you had to be crazy to speak to a psychologist. He was that old, from the old world thinking around mental health. And so I never did speak to anyone back then, but I've certainly done the work now, and in many different modalities and different healing ways, and grateful for the opportunity to explore it. Maybe I would never have explored the things I've explored in terms of healing the mind and body. So things happen.
I mean, yeah. And that's kind of funny because like I was talking, I lived in Bundaberg when as I was finishing high school and before I joined the job. And there were two people who lived behind us who I got to be very close friends with because they came to the shop all the time. One chap, Flight Lieutenant Wally Adams. He won the Distinguished Flying Cross for action over Germany as a tail gunner in Lancasters. And Lancaster tail gunners had a life expectancy of 7 missions. He did 30. Yeah, right. yeah. Can you imagine how nervous you'd be? Obviously, that's it.
Well, actually, I was a stunt woman, so yeah, I do actually understand.
I get it.
Hanging from a wire without any safety nets, I understand it.
But he won the Distinguished Flying Cross, and he ended up doing a tour, which is 30 missions. And his wife was a Cockney from the East End, and she was like that. Like both of them went through incredible amounts of trauma. Obviously, Phil, his wife, like their house was blown up. So many of her relatives were killed. She was actually she was marooned, I suppose, in a building for like a day in a bathtub. But look, I did discuss this with them when we were having beers one day, and I said, how did your generation get through that? And Phil, his wife, is within her Cockney accent, said, well, Matthew, we just got on, but she made this qualification. So it wasn't just the English stiff upper lip, like she goes, well, everybody had done that. Like, so, we were going around it, we were discussing it all the time. And she goes, we had our church groups and we had our, so we had these networks and we had these people that, I'm paraphrasing, but this is kind of what she said. She did specifically mention the church groups, incidentally, because she was, C of E lady. And she goes, we'd sit down and we'd talk these things through and give them meaning and, make sense of what happened. So, just this entire generation that went through this traumatic stuff. And you can see how the generation after that, I reckon they just would have looked at that and gone, we just got to suck stuff up without understanding that there was a context. Like when everybody's going around that, you are talking to people. You do have your networks. You're talking to your friend who's lost her family as well. You're talking to the local priest who's, lost his family and the church has been blowing up and, all that kind of stuff. You're doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Support comes in many ways. It doesn't have to be through a registered service. So through friendship, through friends and friendship. Mine was traveling, so I explored the world. I did make a lot of friends through traveling, but it was kind of a runaway as well. But we find all kinds of healing in all kinds of places. And when you find what it is, like for me, it was hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
When you find what it is that resonates with you mentally and emotionally and physically, because it's a whole body healing. We hold and store trauma in the body. It's not just the mind. So when you find that overall person or principle or method or modality, then take that, go there. Listen not to all the others of naysayers and do what feels good, providing we do no harm to other people in doing so.
Yeah, do no harm. That's knowing where that is. But okay, how did this change? So how did you, obviously going through this specific traumatic event, how did it change your relationship with suffering? Like, what's your relationship with suffering now?
Good question, actually. My relationship with suffering. There's two distinctive sides as an immediate thought to that is one that we allow ourselves to suffer and one we seek healing. So we no longer need to suffer. But getting out of this one, while we're in the suffering, we allow, because I say the word allow, even though it doesn't feel like a choice, but it is an allowance. We're choosing to stay here, even though we haven't realized that yet. And when we start to see, like I did, start to see, well, there's more I need to do more than this to heal, then we then choose to do something else. So I do say those words and I can see, I didn't choose that. Everything we have in our life is kind of a choice, because if we're not choosing to heal, then we're choosing to stay there.
Exactly.
Even though the words, but sometimes words of shock like that actually are part of the healing. When people hear, oh, you're choosing to stay there, I can see that look on, it's almost like the eyes open wider and that they're about to say to me, I'm not, and I can see that awakening come through, especially in my chair here in my office when it's in an actual session. And it can be that light bulb moment, but the question itself is difficult to answer because it's, how do we know when we are suffering? How deeply do we know we're suffering? Sometimes we've suffered for such a long time, we don't know we're actually suffering.
Yeah, you've
We don't
normalized it.
understand that we are suffering until someone takes us out of the suffering and shows us a different way.
Absolutely.
You know, we may not be happy. The body may be showing signs of illness or disease because of our choices that we didn't know we were choosing. It's a big mind game, the whole choose choice sort of thing, until we see the light come on in a different room and we know there's, oh, all of a sudden we've got another option.
You know, I think this relationship is so important because, you know, I know a lot of people and some quasi-religious thought, you know, believes that, you know, life is about the avoidance of suffering. And like, yeah, I mean, if you can dodge some, if you see a bullet coming your way, you can get the hell out of the way. I mean, like, yes, but if you can't dodge that bullet and the suffering is imposed on you, like what happened to you, and I'm sure what's happened to, you know,
many people
who are listening, what's happened to every human being. I mean, at some time in their life, you know, there is something that's been imposed on you. So like, you know, you got cancer, like you can't, you know what I mean? It's like, okay.
I don't think there's anybody that hasn't had trauma or suffering in their life.
Absolutely.
And in some ways it makes us who we are today. It's a learning tool if you choose to see it that way, rather than, you know, the moment I started to understand that I could use my past as a learning and a lesson, life changed.
Yeah.
Because I was no longer suffering.
Yeah. Again, that's changing the relationship between the act. That's right. Well, it's actually redefining it. Like, you know, in some ways embracing suffering so you can redefine it. So you go through that process of redefining it and changing it from something
it does
bad.
Define you. It does define you. Suffering does define who you are. And then through the suffering, I was like, well, what healed me? And other people will go, well, sports, or it was a religion, or whatever it is that you find that is your healing. Go there.
Absolutely. Well, look, can we talk a bit, because I was a fan of Dale's, because like I was a kid and I remember seeing him in the Post magazine back then. You don't remember that magazine that existed? I'm pretty sure, because my mum used to get the Australian's Women's Weekly, and I don't know, maybe I saw an article in there as well. But
There's
like,
also Playboy. Don't let that one slide out of your memory.
Yeah, I'm sure my secret is safe with you. But
I remember walking up the street with my cousin, and we always used to get loads of copies of all the articles.
Yeah.
And we both had armfuls of Playboy, and this one lady in Wyong saw us kids, we were like, 14 at the time or something, and she was just like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Who lets their children have all those copies of Playboy?
But you can honestly say,
funny.
We got it for the articles. No, really, we actually did get it for the articles.
My brother's in here. I was like,
my brother's in there.
Weirded her out even more, probably, but it was funny.
Yeah, my brother's in there. No,
kids.
Not in the centerfold. In the article. It's just like, you know what? I'm even going to stop trying to explain this.
It was one of those moments.
Yeah.
Anyway,
there's no talking your way out of that, really, is there? But like, he was, he was genuinely amazing. And like, I remember, because it first come to, him kicking bottom, jumping, all of these things, buses and whatnot over here in Australia. But then when he went to America, and it was like, yeah, Aussie boy coming good over there. And he nearly got the world record.
Like, it was just it was just our family. That's who we were. That's what Dale did.
Yeah.
To us, it wasn't any great shakes, really. And then I got involved, and I could sort of see the other side of it, of how big a production it really was, how much work went into it, how much time and grit and money.
Yeah, my brother just jumps over buses, and I hang upside down under motorbikes underneath him. It's like,
it seriously was. It was.
What do you guys do on the weekend? I mean,
we were that kind of people. We were just like, oh yeah, this is just what we do. We're always very grounded.
It's just the way Clan Buggins rolls, baby. Yeah.
It would have been, the question for me is where could it have gone to had Dale not have taken that choice?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was heading in all kinds of directions. We were getting quite a lot of interest from overseas international media, but not just for the stunt work. There was more things coming through. There was more TV opportunities, more media stuff happening, more. I was offered to work for a couple of places or, media places in Australia, which I'm not going to go into because, there was never a contract. It was all just starting to happen.
Yeah.
So, if Dale hadn't have taken his life, and one of those particular contracts stood after Dale passed, but I just couldn't go there.
Yeah. No.
So, where would life? Sometimes I think, well, what would have happened? Where would we would have been so stressed I could have joined the 27 club. At 27, a lot of the world artists passed because they became stars too young. Amy Winehouse, I love that woman, but I predicted she would be a 27 club, and she was a 27 club.
Yeah, God, it's so sad, isn't it?
Yeah. So you just don't know. I mean, let's just enjoy the memories that we have, even as unfortunate as the demise or the ending of Dale's life was. We're just living for the moment.
She's quite right. Out of darkness can come light. Obviously, Dale's short, tragic, and unnecessary death was something that it didn't affect me anywhere near as much as it affected his sister, clearly, but it really did affect me. And he was a role model, and we know now that one of the leading causes of death for young men is suicide. It's right up there. So obviously, if anyone out there is feeling the same way and you do need a bit of help, don't hesitate to reach out. There's Beyond Blue. There's all these other magnificent services. There's a Dr. Edward Coe Foundation. There's just simple places like Lifeline too. Now, I know several people that actually work the phones in Lifeline, and they literally save lives. So please, thank you so much for staying with us. I've got some excellent interviews coming up. If you know anyone that should be coming on, if you want to come on yourself, please don't hesitate to contact me. But I really appreciate all the love I'm getting and all the comments. Please send more in. That's what I want to see and hear. See you all next week.